Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop at the mall. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. I tell I'm running out of breath, I tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, 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 goddammit, we fresh. Fresh, fresh, goddammit, we so damn fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And on Fresh is the Word, we like to deliver wisdom through great stories from the minds of bright creatives of pop culture. Through those stories, we like to dissect the journey of our guests and present actionable lessons and advice for our listeners, no matter what career or avenue of artistry they pursue. And before we get into this episode, I want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foul Mouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can always go to freshisthepodcast.com and just share any of the links for any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. And also, you can subscribe to Fresh is the Word pretty much anywhere that podcasts are streamed. And that includes Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, pretty much everywhere. And please rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It will definitely help out the show. If you want to contact me, you can always reach me by email at djkfresh@gmail.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KFresh is the word, and on Facebook at facebook.com/KFresh. And you can also follow Fresh is the Word on Twitter at Fresh is the Word, and that's is with an IZ, Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast. And this is episode 138. For this episode, we are joined by film writer and director Brian Skiba, whose current project, Rottentail, created by episode 137 guest David C. Hayes, is premiering at select locations throughout the month of April. And during our interview, we talked about the process of making this horror comedy Rottentail, his history with David C. Hayes, his beginnings as a writer and director, and advice for young directors breaking into the film business. All right, let's get on to the interview with Brian Skiba.
It's not Peter anymore. It's Rottentail now. I am a rabbit man. I mean, not like a rabbit man, but a rabbit man.
Yeah, I was there the other night for the world premiere of Rottentail at the Imagine Theater in Royal Oak. It was a fun event. What do you think about seeing, the movie for the first time in front of a crowd like that?
It's pretty awesome, actually. Lots of laughs. It's great seeing it on a huge, huge screen. I mean, that's it's always fun. And I think overall the response was amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a very fun movie. It was a riot, and a lot of dick spots. That was kind of like the funniest parts, and the ministry parts were very funny too.
Yeah, no, we definitely, had a lot of dick jokes, that's for sure. And then Billy McNamara, he's an outstanding actor. He really brought Pastor Jake to life. So.
So I had David C. Hayes on the podcast recently, and he kind of talked about the history, of doing Rottentail, and he's known you for a long time. What's your story with working with David C. Hayes throughout the years?
So Dave was an instructor at Grand Canyon University, and I was going to film school at Scottsdale Community College. And Grand Canyon, David had a festival, and I submitted my short to his festival, and then we ended up taking Best Short, and that's how I first met Dave, is my short one. And then the short also later went on to Sundance, and was in one of the Sundance short showcase. And then, Dave and I just, we have the same kind of just sick ideas of what's funny, and we just kind of got along. And we ended up doing Blood Moon Rising together, which was my first feature right out of college. And, and he helped bring a crew to it and helped with the writing. And then, and ever since then, we've just always kept in touch, did Crushed Velvet, and we've got numerous scripts we've written together. And, yeah, man, he's been a great mentor and an amazing friend. So.
Right. Yeah, before they showed the movie the other night, you mentioned that David C. Hayes was somebody that you learned a lot from. What were some of the things that you feel like you learned from him being your mentor?
Patience, probably the biggest. I mean, it's one of the biggest things you've got to learn in film is nothing happens overnight when you're waiting for your movie to go. And then when your movie goes, you're going to deal with a lot of different personalities. And if you're impatient, that'll just instantly burn bridges. And, I think there's a lot of fly-by-night guys in this industry. And, they come in, they make a good film, and then they don't do anything ever again because their egos are too big, or they're impatient. They become angry. And whereas with David, he's just been in it for so long, and just kind of taught me to go with the flow, and that's worked for me. There's times in the business I'll go 2-3 months without a job, and then I'll be busy for 2 years, and then and that's just kind of the ebb and flow of this business. So you got to learn that, and then you got to learn how to be patient on set, and things don't always go right. Most of the time they don't, and so you just kind of have to adjust.
Right. Yeah. The idea of patience is something that even I've been trying to deal with, because for a long time I just wanted to go from A to Z, without respecting the journey. How do you deal with, controlling your patience?
I'm like everybody, I don't know. I mean, it definitely gets to you at times, like you said, but you do have to get to a point, and, I'm middle-aged now, and I think that was tough at first, because I always saw myself somewhere, obviously I saw myself, doing big A-list Marvel movies, and this is where I should be. And then I realized, no, I've got to respect my journey, because that's my journey may lead there, it may not, I don't know, but everybody has a different journey, and we all have our own stories to tell. And my path, there was no shortage of wild times and fun times, and I've not gone without. So I have to be appreciative for those things, and I think that's what's important is always being appreciative of what you do have, and then understanding that your path is unique, and to celebrate it.
Yeah, the idea of mentorship is something that I've been really interested recently. Been talking a lot on this podcast. For you, what makes a good mentor?
I've got a few. I've got another gentleman named Ned Nall who's who was the CEO of Universal Television, and then I've got Chris Kane, who was the director of Young Guns, and those are really people I can call upon when I'm having my hard times, or I have a project that I think is amazing, and so I send it out to these guys, and what makes a good mentor is usually what I look for is someone smarter than me. That's I was told once, always surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, and accept it. Understand. You're not the smartest guy in the room, but if you put the smartest guys in the room on your team's always going to win, because this life, as much as most people want to think it's a solo sport, it's not. It's a team sport. So if you put smart people on your team, you're going to succeed. And so I try to surround myself with smart people, and then people who've had success, and then I try to look at what made them successful, and ask them and learn from them and listen to their stories. And it's when I'm with those guys, it's not about me. It's about what did you guys do? How did you do it? How did Young Guns become Young Guns? And Chris will tell you it was all in the casting, and that's something that I've taken to heart, and so it's especially in Rottentail, you can see every character in that. I really focused on casting. There's a few roles that there's always roles that you're kind of forced into, but I think it's getting to a point to where I can be a lot more selective with my casting, and it's making my movies better. So, but mentorship, it's I think what makes a great mentor is those abilities, and someone that's always willing to talk to you no matter what's going on.
For anybody that is trying to break into making movies, making films, what advice would you give them in regards to just the idea of having to work with others and having mentors, having people around them, when there could be, like you even mentioned, that there's a lot of fly-by-night type of people that are in this industry. What sort of advice would you give to avoid any of those hassles and be able to work with those teams?
So, how to be successful and work within the industry, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, how, if someone's trying to break into the industry, what should they expect, and what's the do's and don'ts of trying to break into an industry, and keeping an open-mindedness in regards to having to work with others?
I think what I see from a lot of young kids is they're unwilling to climb the ladder, and everybody wants to be either a director or producer, and nobody wants to write. Everybody just wants to skip to the top, and then if they get that shot, they get there, and then they blow it, because of either impatience or ego or a mixture of the two, or whatever it may be, inexperience. And I think the biggest thing is inexperience. And young people today, they've become accustomed to having it now, because of instant gratification. And it's something I'm trying to teach my sons is look, man, you have to earn it. There's nobody gives you anything. And I remember when I was in school, it was tan staff. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and that's an important thing. Nobody's going to hand you anything. There are the few lucky guys. Don't get me wrong. We live in such a huge society these days. There's billions of people on this earth. There's always going to be 2 or 3 really lucky guys that land their first gig, and then they just happen to blossom. But that's the rarity. That's not the norm. So what young people today need to understand is even though you look at on Facebook and you see these guys you see a couple of guys blow up, that's not the normal. There's thousands of people that are trying to do the same thing that haven't blown up, and the way to get there, without luck, because there is luck, but it's not prevalent. So in order to get there without luck is hard work, and you got to work hard, and so you're not going to be a director day one. You're not going to be a producer day one. And I see a lot of young kids on Facebook. I'm directing this. I'm a director. And it's like, no, dude. You're gaining experience to be a director, but what it takes to be a director is a lot of things. It takes a lot of I started in construction, and I lend a lot of that to, lend a lot of my success because I understand how to manage crews. So part of directing is you got to manage crews, you got to manage actors, you got to know how to write. I have a degree in English, so go build the tools that it takes in your craft. I didn't start directing. I started in sound, actually. I was a sound guy. I ran the boom pole. I did the sound mixing. I had a sound studio in my house because I was in a band, so I did some scores, and that's where I got my start in film. So I started there and then just started learning everything, the camera, went to film school, even though I was a senior at ASU with an English degree, and I decided I was going to go back to school for film and went to community college. That was the only film school around around ASU, and went and did film school and kind of slowed my senior year down just so I could do that. And so it's growth, man. It's very few guys are going to get there tomorrow. It's gonna, and those guys that get there tomorrow, most of them burn out quick. So I think it's all about the long game, and that's what I always tell myself: is have patience. It's a long game. Build. Not every project's going to be perfect. Not every project's going to be a hit. It's just like creating music. Every song you write isn't a number one. It's the same in film, and so you just got to keep going. And some people are going to tell you you're worthless, and that's the hard part. There are always going to be the naysayers, but you got to believe in yourself, and that's the most important thing. So if you believe in yourself and you're willing to work hard, you'll find success.
Yeah, you mentioned that you did sound before, and then you also worked in construction. What the idea of having these other roles or jobs along the way that have transferable skills that might help you make it in making films? What's the importance of keeping open-mindedness of maybe doing those other jobs that might not be directly to the point where you want to be, but might have those transferable skills?
Well, I mean, the thing with the guy being on top of the pyramid is the guy that climbed that pyramid, and most guys that climb the pyramid, they know every brick all the way up, and that's the importance. Is you look at the big guys, the Tony Scotts of the world, these guys that made huge films, and James Camerons and Sam Raimi's, and you look at these guys, and these guys don't know. They don't know just directing. I mean, these guys know sound. I mixed my third film, Dirty Little Trick. I had a room right next door to Tony Scott, and he was mixing Unstoppable, the train movie, and I got to meet him and talk to him for a minute, and he was telling me that sound is so important for him. He's at every sound session, and he sits right in the middle of the room with the mixers and understands how the boards work, understands how the mixing works. And, and that's just it, is if you want to be a successful boss or the guy at the top of the pyramid, you got to know everybody else's job. And so the best way to know everybody else's job is to actually do it, is to actually open up Avid and then learn the program. Because when you're sitting with an editor and you go, I want to do this, there, and that, and you don't understand, you're trying to describe him a J-cut, but you don't know the lingo because you've never sat in Avid or bothered to learn, the editor speak. Because every job has its own little lingo too, and that's what's important is understanding music. What's a crescendo? What's that mean? Go and find out. You don't have to be a musician to read about it or to go sit with a guy that writes score and say, okay, here's a big buildup. What's that mean? Here's a little, subtle ending. What do you call that? Those kind of things. So, that's what's important. You've got to know all the crafts if you want to be the guy at the top. So.
Getting back to Rottentail, David was saying that this story has been like, to bring it to a movie has been like a 19-year journey for him. And, tell, from your side of things, how did things start in regards to making it into a film?
Started for me, I think it was 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years, something like that. David approached me. At the time, I was being repped by Shoreline Entertainment, and and David approached me and said, "Hey, man, I'm not going to act anymore." David was acting and decided he didn't want to act anymore. He just wanted to focus on his writing. So I introduced him to my manager, who loved writers, and my manager took him on, looked through his projects, and then came to David and I and said, "Hey, look, there's this project here, Rottentail, that David has. Brian, you guys already did one together. Why don't you guys do another one together?" And of course we were like, "Well, that's done. Yeah, we should have thought of that a long time ago." And so I had already read the graphic novel at that point, but I hadn't read the script. So David sent me the script, and I read the script, and he and I proceeded to rewrite the script over and over again, because the script initially was a direct rip from the headlines of Rottentail, whereas I felt like, I felt like the graphic novel's one piece of work. Let's not try to duplicate that piece of work. Let's try to emulate or accentuate the piece of work. So what I thought was more interesting was the Rottentail birth story, I guess, is how he's created. I always think those are great stories and a good start to what we hope is a franchise. So so that's how I was introduced, and David and I worked on the script for about a year and a half, and then funding started rolling in, and we got to work, made the film.
Aside from your long-standing friendship with David, what was it about the Rottentail story from the beginning that sort of piqued your interest in wanting to do this movie?
Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Grindhouse. I'm a huge fan of B movies. I grew up in the '80s and early '90s, or my teen years, and those were, those were cool times for movies because things were fresh. It's not like, and not everything had this gloss like today. Today you can destroy an entire freaking city and it looks totally real. You couldn't do that back then, so you had to be creative with your storytelling. And so when I got my hands on Rottentail, it was based in the '80s, and I was like, man, this, David and I had already done Blood Moon Rising, which was the '60s, and we had this concept with Blood Moon Rising that it was a grindhouse movie that was locked in a vault until today, and then we finally released it. So it was locked in a vault since the '60s, and so we were like, well, let's just do that again. It had success then. Blood Moon Rising was picked up by E1, and it did really well, and it's got a cult following. So we were like, let's stick to it. Let's kind of try to make this thing into a thing for us. So we did it again, and the idea is it was Rottentail is it's a 1980s VHS tape, filmed on 16 millimeter, and that's what we want to take you back to the early '80s and watch a film that you missed. You didn't get to see it, and so that's the idea with Rottentail. Is this is a film from the '80s, and even though it's brand new, it's going to look like the '80s. Sounds a little bit better, but other than that, it's going to look like the '80s, and it's going to play like the '80s, feel like the '80s, and hopefully you laugh. And that's the point.
Yeah, when I was talking with David, he said that after you guys did all the script writing, he kind of took a hands-off approach to the making of the film and kind of just put the trust in you and the crew that you put together to make this film. How do you feel? How do you feel about the trust that David put into you to make this film?
I think it's great. I appreciate that. It's as a creator, that's the way a lot of my producers work. Once the script's nailed down, they know that I'm going to deliver them a great marketable film. And so, that's just kind of, and again, building upon my skills and my experience, I'm fortunate enough that I'm allowed to do that. Whereas, there's a lot of people that end up having to deal with a lot of hands-on, and their creativity gets stifled. So, fortunately, I didn't have that case, and it says a lot, and I'm thankful that Dave did that.
From the time you started rewriting the script with David to the time when you started the movie, you know, what was going through your head about what you wanted to do with it, and did anything in general change throughout that process?
I mean, things always change, but big things, no, no. I mean, the idea. I mean, the thing is, we already had a fan base. We already had, we already had something we were working from. So the world was already there. I think big changes come when you're starting something really fresh, and it's like, oh, we could do this or we could do that. But when you're working from an adaptation, the world is already kind of defined. So I would say the only thing that was askew was that the look of Rottentail. We didn't really our Rottentail I think looks absolutely amazing, and we owe that a lot to Todd Tucker and Illusion Industries and Josh Tessier, one of the producers, and because I didn't want the hairy bunny Amazon suit. I wanted something that looked scary, but then when he cracked a joke, made you laugh, and that was important. But as far as departures, no, man. I mean, up until we were shooting, there was a lot of scenes from the comic that are still in the movie. The scene where he ends up getting with Destiny. That's straight ripped from the comic book. I won't spoil too much, but there's a lot straight from the comic book.
In regards to the jokes in the movie, there's a lot of silly punchlines, and they're all really good. Was there any sort of improv involved in that, or was all that just straight up from the script? What was sort of the freedom in regards to making those punchlines actually work in the movie?
Well, there's always, I mean, some directors, they want you to say every word exactly as it's written. I'm not one of those guys because I feel like that stifles creativity. So, unless I'm doing obviously something for a network or something, but if it's like this, where it's where we have creativity, and I've brought in actors like Corin and Billy that are amazing, and Dominique and Johnny, and these guys that I trust, and I bring them in, and we work together. And so a lot of Corin stuff, it was spur of the moment. It'd be either he'd just toss it out there, or he and I would work on the dialogue prior to going to set, and come up with some of these jokes. We'd sit around the trailers while stuff was being set up, and we'd run the scenes throughout, we'd run the scenes together, and then we'd be like, what about this? What about that? And we kind of just riff. And so that was that's where a lot of the one-liners came from, was just us riffing off each other. And then Corin, is great personality, man. And he's very funny and a great actor. And he would just riff on the fly too. There's probably at least a handful of lines there that, still make me laugh. And, even though I've seen it so many times that were solely him, just in character, and being in character and in the mask, and he put it on. And then a lot of Billy's stuff, Pastor Jake, was also, Billy and I just riffing, a lot of the commercials, those weren't initially actually written on the page. We had one commercial that was written on the page, and then we had actually broke down the set and walked away, and I kept playing them. I was like, damn, dude, I'd love to have like 5 of those. And so I went back and I made the crew set everything back up, and I pulled Billy out of his dressing room. I'm like, Billy, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a whole bunch of commercials, and then I'm going to just litter them throughout the film. And, and we're just going to, we're going to make an afternoon of it, because we had some time. So we went in and we spent like 3 hours just shooting commercials. And at one point he was, he was giving this spiel on, come on down, I'll baptize you and your family. And I was like, Billy, you're a used car salesman. Sell it. And so he's like, all right, I'll baptize you for $19.95. And that was it, man. And it just went from there. And all of a sudden it was like, all right, Pastor Jake charges. He's not, he's not giving you salvation for free. He wants money. And it worked, man. And it's funny, and I think a lot of comedy is happens in the spur of the moment. I don't think you can write comedy and you can set the stage for comedy, but I think all the comedy greats will tell you that the actually most funny moments are spur of the moment. So.
Those Pastor Jake commercials were so funny. I'm so glad you decided to do all of those, man. I was dying laughing, man.
Yeah.
They were so. I could watch a whole movie about Pastor Jake and all his fuckery going on, because all that was so good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, well, we've explored that, so that may come true. So.
I hope so. I hope so. What what do you hope comes out of this movie? What are your kind of expectations now that it's starting to be premiered?
I try to limit my expectations. This is my, I think it's, as far as a director, I think it's my 18th or 19th movie. As far as producing, directing, writing, it's like 25 or 26, and features. And it's I'm at a point now where it's kind of like I'm numb. It's like the first time you get laid. It's like, this is awesome. By the 100th, it's like, yeah, okay, it's awesome, but not as much. And that's kind of where I'm at. It's like, yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. It's coming out. I hope it does great, but I don't want to have that expectation, because when you birth something like that and you put it out in the world, you just don't know, man. It's like, there's things that I've done where I'm like, oh man, this thing is trash and nobody's going to watch this. And then all of a sudden it becomes the most watched film in Spain's history. It's just like, what? You just don't know. So I try to hold back on any kind of expectations until well after the movie's released. And of course, I'd love to see it do amazingly well, and us to keep working on the franchise. So.
Cool. How is it working with everybody over at Source Point Press on making this movie?
Travis and Josh and all of the crew, they're amazing, man. Amazing. They really let us be creatively free, and Travis is Travis leads that group amazingly well, and he's fun to work with, and I hope we can team up again here pretty soon. We've got a few other things cooking, so we'll keep it going. But I absolutely enjoyed every step of the way with him.
I always like to ask this question when I'm interviewing people, but if there was sort of like a nugget of knowledge from your life or career that anybody listening to this podcast, no matter what avenue of artistry that they're in, that they sort of could project into their own life, what would that be? For me, it's never give up. I think that's the biggest thing is never give up. Never give up your dreams. Never give up on where what you want to be or what you want to do in your life. It's just you gotta. Look, man, I was born in a small mining town in Salmonwell, Arizona. And I was destined to work in a mine. That was when people talk about destiny or whatever, it's like, no, man, you pick your destiny. You get, we as long as you work hard, as long as you go forward, and hold to your dreams, you can make them come true. And it may not be on your time, and it may not be exactly how you envisioned, but you can definitely make dreams come true. You just got to hold on to them and not ever let go, and not let people tell you no, because everyone will tell you no, from your parents to your brothers to your cousins to your aunts to your girlfriends. I've gone through 2 marriages, and look, man, everybody's going to tell you no, and you just got to go. This is my life. I want this dream, and as long as you hold on to that, you can make it. How did you kind of go about, when you grew up in this town that you're, most people are destined to go into this one career? How did you kind of stay true to yourself and take this other direction?
That wasn't easy. My parents eventually moved to Phoenix, and then from there it wasn't easy. I had I had basically I had to say this is what I'm going to do, and I moved out, lived on my own, and I had the job in construction, and that kind of supplemented me going to college, because I had to pay for my own way, and so I paid for college, and I paid for film school, and then eventually I paid for a camera, and then I started filming, and then I got my first feature, and that allowed me to start doing it full time, and then I just but it definitely wasn't easy, and there was lots of times where you're sitting there and you're eating top ramen totally broke and wishing, man, maybe I should try something else, but the passion was too strong. I didn't see myself doing anything else ever, and I think that's what kept me going.
Yeah, even though you had that passion, was there a moment in your life, in your career, that you just realized, hey, this directing thing that I'm doing, it might actually work out?
It was probably my first. It was probably when I had my first TV movie. I think it was 7 years ago or 6 years ago, Defending Santa. It was a Christmas movie, which is weird because the only movies that I had directed to that point were 2 horror films and a sci-fi. A horror comedy, straight horror, another straight horror, and a sci-fi. So I had done 4 movies to that point. So I had no idea what I was doing. I just had somebody come to me and say, hey, people are buying Christmas movies. You should write one. So I wrote one, and I got it picked up by a network, and I met the network exec, and we got along great. And, the film still rates. It still plays to today. It's still every Christmas. It's on Ion Channel. And that was really the first time when I think my parents also kind of accepted it. They were like, oh, he's actually, this is a career. So, so that was kind of the first time where I was like, all right, I can actually make some money at this and make a career out of it. And it's not a lottery. You can work at it. And I think it's becoming more institutionalized just because there's so much media these days. I think back in the 80s and 70s and 80s where my parents grew up, it was it was a far-fetched dream, being in the movies. Whereas today, there's so much work in the industry. There's just you can go to school for it. You can get a good job. Granted, it's probably not going to be a director or a producer or something like that, but you can definitely go and there's solid tracks. There's ways to get in the industry. There's ways to make money. There's ways to be successful, and it's a lot more opportunity these days. But
so that was my interview with Brian Skiba. For more information on where you can see Rottentail the movie, go to rottentailthemovie.com. It'll be in select theaters all this month of April and will soon be available on DVD and Blu-ray. And remember, if you can, please go to the Fresh is the Word Patreon at patreon.com/Fresh is the Word. And please, there's a lot of goodies that you can get starting with the $3 per month tier. But only for $1, you could just help out if you only have $1 a month. But please go to patreon.com/Fresh is the Word if you want to help out a little bit. All right. Thanks for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.